Imagine a lump of wet clay, small enough to hold in one hand. 5,000 years ago, someone pressed a few marks into it with a sharpened reed. That little tablet was thrown away when it stopped being useful, but it survived. And it is one of the oldest pieces of writing on Earth. This is not a story someone made up. It is real, and we can hold these tablets today. So here is the strange part. Why would anyone invent writing in the first place? Not for poems, not for letters. The very first thing humans wrote down was a list of cows. To understand why, we have to travel back about 5,000 years to a hot, flat land between two great rivers. The land was called Mesopotamia. The name comes from old Greek words meaning the land in the middle of rivers. Today, most of it is the country of Iraq. Back then, it was the place where the very first cities on Earth were being born. Two rivers ran through it, the Euphrates and the Tigris. And here is the odd thing about them. Most of the south was desert, barely any rain fell. By all rights, nothing should have grown there at all. But every year the rivers flooded, and when the water spread across the land, it left behind a gift. A layer of fine, soft mud called silt. That silt was rich and fertile. Farmers dug channels to guide the floodwater onto their fields of wheat, barley and lentils. And the soil was so good that this desert grew more food than almost anywhere else in the ancient world. Stop and picture that. A desert, feeding cities. But here is the lesson that surprises people. Good farming alone does not make a city. Lots of villages grew plenty of food and stayed villages forever. So what is the difference between a village and a city? A city is a place where most people stop growing their own food and start doing one special job instead. Let me show you what that means. Picture a craftsman who carves beautiful stone seals. That is all he does. He is brilliant at it, but he cannot make his own tools. And he has no idea where to find the colored stones he carves. He depends on other people for both. The toolmaker depends on someone else for the metal. The metal seller depends on traders from far away. Everyone needs everyone. This web of people, each doing one job and trading for the rest, has a name. Historians call it the division of labor. And it is the real heartbeat of a city. Let's pause and think. First, what was the gift that the rivers left behind that made farming possible in a desert? Second, why do you think a city needs people to specialize in different jobs instead of everyone doing everything? And third, if you lived back then, what one job would you want to be the best in the whole city at? Have a think. Now, this web of jobs had a problem. Mesopotamia had rich soil but almost no stone, no good wood, and no metal of its own. So where did it all come from? Trade. The people of the south sent out their extra grain and cloth and brought back wood, copper, tin, silver, and precious stones. It came from Turkey, from Iran, from across the sea. And the cheapest way to move heavy goods was by boat, floating down the river with the current. So the rivers were not just for water, they were the great roads of the ancient world, and down those roads moved everything a city needed. But once you have hundreds of people trading goods at different times, you hit a problem. How do you remember who gave what to whom? You cannot hold it all in your head, and this, at last, is why writing was born. Around 3,200 years before the year zero, the people of a city called Uruk began pressing little pictures into clay. A picture of an ox, a picture of a fish, a picture of grain. Next to them, numbers. These were lists kept by the temples of what came in and what went out. So writing did not begin with a beautiful story. It began with accounting. It began because a busy city simply had to keep track of its stuff. Here is how they did it. A scribe would wet a piece of clay and smooth it flat. Then, with a reed cut to a sharp wedge, he pressed marks into the soft surface. We call this writing cuneiform, from a word meaning wedge-shaped. Once the clay dried hard in the sun, it lasted almost forever. And that is the lucky reason we know so much about these people. Clay does not rot. Buried in the ground, those tablets waited thousands of years for us to find them. But learning to write was hard. There were not 26 letters like in English. There were hundreds of signs, and each one stood for a whole syllable. So very few people could read or write at all. A scribe was a respected, skilled worker. In fact, if a king could read, he would brag about it in his inscriptions. Let's pause and think again. 1. What was the very first thing the people of Uruk used writing for? 2. Why do you think writing lasted so well in Mesopotamia, when it might have been lost somewhere else? 3. If writing had never been invented, what is one thing about city life that simply could not work? Think about it. Now, who ran these cities? Two kinds of power grew up together side by side. The first was the temple. A temple was the house of a god. People brought grain, fish, and curd to the god, and over time the temple became something bigger than a place of prayer. It became the manager of the whole community. It stored the grain, employed workers, organized the weaving and the oil pressing, and kept careful written records of it all. The second power was the king, and kings often rose up out of war. The land was always short of water, and villages upstream and downstream fought over the rivers and canals. A leader who won those fights gained followers and loot. At first, these war leaders came and went, but the clever ones did something lasting. They gave treasure to the gods, beautified the temples, and organized the city. And that gave them something more powerful than a sword, the authority to command. People obeyed them. We can actually see this in an ancient poem about a king named Enmerkar, an early ruler of Uruk. The story says trade did not yet exist. Enmerkar wanted precious blue stone and metal to decorate a temple, so he sent a messenger across 7 mountain ranges to a distant land. Back and forth the messenger went, carrying threats and promises until he was so tired he could no longer remember the words. So the king did something new. He took a tablet of clay and he wrote the message down. In the story, this is the very first time anyone writes words on clay. It is a story, not a history report. But it tells us how Mesopotamians saw their own world. That it was kings who organized trade, and that writing was a sign of how grand their cities were. And they were proud of those cities, so proud that one of the most famous stories ever written ends not with a battle, but with a wall. In the epic of Gilgamesh, a great hero searches the whole world for the secret of living forever. He crosses oceans. He gives everything. And in the end, he fails. He comes home to Uruk, tired and empty-handed, but then he looks up at the strong brick walls his people built and walks along them, back and forth. And that is his comfort. Not gold, not living forever. The city itself, the thing his people made together that would outlast them all. So what should you carry away from all of this? 3 things. First, cities were not built by good farming alone. They grew when people specialized, traded, and depended on one another. Second, writing was not invented for stories. It was invented to keep records, because a busy city had too much to remember. And third, the Mesopotamians gave us gifts we still use every single day, often without knowing it. They split the year into 12 months, the hour into 60 minutes, and the circle into degrees. The next time you check a clock, you are using their idea. Which brings us back to that small lump of clay, and the marks pressed into it by a tired scribe. It was never meant to be important. It was just a list. But it was the beginning of something enormous. Because once humans learned to press their thoughts into clay, they could pass knowledge from one person to the next, across thousands of years, all the way down to you.